My live experience includes performing at Woodstock in 1994, supporting the Rolling Stones, REM, Bon Jovi, Van Halen, Oasis, and Bryan Adams at Wembley with my first band, Amitri, throughout 1994 through 1997, followed by touring and playing with Marianne Faithfull, Sinead O'Connor, Sheryl Crow, Robbie Williams, James Morrison, Will Young, Squeeze, Lewis Taylor, Hamish Stuart, the Waterboys, Jeff Lorber, Trevor Horn and Seal, among many, many more. Other experiences I've had include playing the 2012 Olympic Games opening ceremony with Mike Oldfield, being the house drummer on the BBC TV show The Voice for 7 years, and playing on the Terminator, Genisys, and Mission Impossible Fallout soundtracks for composer Lorne Balfe, also Kung Fu Panda 3 and The Lion King from 2019 for Hans Zimmer. The main part of my career has been within the recording industry, and over the past 20 years or so, I have recorded 58 top 10 albums for artists including Cher, Seal, Robbie Williams, Billy Idol, Adele, Enrique Iglesias, Dionne Warwick, and Rumer, James Morrison, CeeLo, Celine Dion, and Ronan Keating. My discography also includes 18 top 10 singles, and to date, I've recorded 29 number one albums and 10 number one singles, which have been featured on various pop and rock charts around the world. So, clearly I'm not describing myself, Mike Epstein, with this impressive biography. No, I'm sure you've realized that by now. I've just read the bio of Ash Soan. Ash is one of the top session drummers in the world. And over the course of almost 70 episodes for Speaking of the Arts, I can honestly say I was both more nervous and excited in preparing for this one than probably any other. You know, sometimes we're lucky enough to meet our own personal heroes and people who have had a strong influence on us, and how cool is it that when you finally get to meet them, they turn out to be even more generous and kind than you'd hoped for. Well, that was exactly my experience in speaking with Ash for this episode. We talk about his trajectory as a musician, how technology has changed both the way Ash records music and listens to it, how he prepares for sessions with major pop stars, what his process is for saying no and yes to projects, and a lot more. I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Ash Soan. Well, Ash, what a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me, to be on our podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's truly an honor. I'm a huge fan. I'm a drummer. I'm also obviously a booking agent. I've followed what you do as a musician. It's just mind blowing. So congrats to all. Yeah, congrats to all of your. My pleasure. Congrats to all of your success and everything. And a lot I want to ask you about, but I want to be conscious of your time. I thought we might actually start our conversation with something I heard you say as part of another interview, or rather it was a feature for the Audience Company.
Yeah.
And one of the things you said in that was towards the very end, basically cleaning up the your drums there, and you said, it's fascinating that for almost 100 years, the way we drummers approach this instrument hasn't really changed.
That's right.
But the technology has. And when you said that, I immediately thought of, do you ever have a chance to see the documentary? It's called The Wrecking Crew.
No, I should watch it. I've been told to watch it so many times that I haven't. Bless you.
Obviously, you know what that's about. But for our listeners, real quick, The Wrecking Crew is this wonderful documentary directed by Denny Tedesco. Yeah. And it's about the session musicians of the 50s, 60s, 70s in Los Angeles. This was the core group of musicians who backed Frank Sinatra and all of the biggest stars of the day. It's the same group of musicians, record after record after record. Yeah. And so when you said that, for some reason, my mind went to that documentary and the footage of these musicians in the big studios that they had where they're all together, basically these rehearsal halls, microphones everywhere. And I was thinking, wow, he's absolutely right, because the fundamentals, certainly as drummers, hasn't really changed. Of course, the technology has.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was thinking, and I'm getting to my question, is while technology has changed so much, the way we as listeners has also changed.
Yeah.
Right. And, when I first really got into music, I'm lucky in that there were still record stores, and I would go A to Z every single record. And I'm a jazz drummer, so I was looking through all of the jazz drummers and jazz musicians and trying to figure out who played with who. So finally, here's my question for you. The way we listen to music has really changed, but it's gone from listening to full-length albums more and more to single tracks. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the musicians you're working with now. How has that changed your experience as a session musician compared to what it was like maybe 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, 20 years ago, I guess it was musicians, a lot of musicians in a room playing together, you know, and I guess 20 years ago, well, 15 years ago at least, I was recording a lot with Trevor Horn, and Trevor comes from that world where it's like he understands the magic that you might capture if you get multiple musicians together. Something just might spark that. Of course, when it ends up on a recording, that's it forever.
Right.
But you can't catch that spark if you've got in a way if you've got individuals playing, you know, just on their own two backing tracks, which is actually essentially what I do in this room most of the time. You know, I'm playing to tracks. Pop music now is, you know, so it's kind of, it's very rare that you're playing with other musicians.
Right.
I did something with Sam Smith a week or so ago, and that was a whole band with Sam, that's pretty rare, to be honest, you know. But funnily enough, the whole sentiment of the song benefited from having the musicians playing together with Sam, you know. And I think, you know, that producer in particular, Jimmy Napes, realized that artist is best when he's got musicians moving around him with his vocal, whereas some singers it wouldn't matter really, you know, their performance would be a certain thing and you can add something to that, hopefully that's good, but whatever you do in the room isn't going to change what they're singing. Whereas I think with a great singer like Sam, you know, they are going to change dynamically, whereas some singers won't. You know,
that makes perfect sense. So somebody was asking me the other day, are musicians starting to record specifically to cater to the algorithms of Spotify? Are they starting to consciously think about the way that system works, which is beyond me? You know, cultivating playlists based on people's listening habits over and over and over again. And are musicians starting to do that? And my answer was, I hope not.
Well, I think there's no question that producers are.
Yes.
There's certainly producers out there that are looking at hit songs of the day and going, we need to do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I actually feel that producers like that are forever chasing their tail. You know, or rather, they're chasing somebody else's tail.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're trying to do the thing that already exists, like you said, on Spotify. And, you know, as always, the movers and the shakers are the ones that get the results in some respects, that dare to be different and dare to change things. But I think you're absolutely correct. You know, and there is a sort of algorithm, if you think about it, you know, certain BPMs.
Certain keys.
Yes, certain keys, exactly. You know, and I think, you know, there's definitely formula.
Right.
And certainly in pop music, without question.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, I hear it all the time. You know, in fact, it's very, very difficult to try and often it's very difficult to do something new when it's like, oh, it's the same confines of a formula, and you still got to try and make that thing that's happened thousands of times with thousands of songs sound different somehow. It's like, wow, okay.
Well, there's an art to that for sure.
I'll try do this, you know. It's exactly. And it so I think you're right. But getting back to what you said originally, we're still drummers. I'm still playing 8 notes and 2 and 4 on pop music. There's no question about that. It's how it sounds, and you know, with the technology, you can make it sound a certain way. Obviously now, which back in the day, people went for a good sound, as good a sound as they could get in that room. Certainly with the Wrecking Crew, I think they weren't trying to make the drums sound like anything particularly strange. It was like, let's let's make it functional so this song works, you know,
Right.
and make the drums sound cool, you know,
Right.
and good, you know, good in that room. Whereas now we can do good standing on our heads. You know, now what people are doing is like, can we make it different? How many times can we hear how many times can we hear it, and how many times, and it's still 4/4. If you think about pop music, it's very rarely, pretty much every song is 4/4. You know, if you think about that, that's crazy as well. You know, that we haven't, people have experimented with 3 and 6 and 12/8 and 7 and 5 and things like that, but predominantly pop music is in 4/4.
Absolutely.
So a 2 and 4 backbeat. So what can you do to make that different? And then it's the sound and the textures and the, you know, the ambience. That's the thing that people are messing with, and it's certainly what I'm messing with in my studio.
Yeah, so it begs the question then, how do you listen to music? Are you still, if you can, going for the full album? Are you listening to tracks? Does it depend on what the job is? What's your preferred method of listening to music right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, usually the way I listen to, most of the time I listen to music is because I'm shedding something, I'm learning something. Like I just said to you now, I've got an album next week, which I can't mention who it is, but I'm listening to a lot of that person's music. So that's, and I'm interestingly, I'm learning the songs, but I'm also learning about that particular artist and the particular drummers that he used. Some really great drummers actually on the original tracks. So I kind of, the way I listen to music is dictated mainly by my work and what I'm doing, but also, you know, stuff that I'm really into at the moment. I, you know, still obviously go back to the Beatles and all those things. They're still in my life completely. But I love Chris Dave, you know, Chris Daddy Dave. I like the hip hop guys that are experimenting. I like that. I like the feels and I like the sounds that they're going for. So that if I do have time to sit down and just listen to music at my leisure, I'll probably put something like that on, you know.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear you say that. I was actually just listening to I got to pull it up so I get the name correct. I don't actually know if this has a name. So this is a bunch of tracks, Tokyo Sunset, bunch of fives.
Yeah, that's my EP. So I was very lucky to be on the Seth Meyers show with the band, you know, from here remotely. And the guys at Seth said, "Oh, have you got an album?" Because Seth will hold it up and promote it for you. And I was like, you know what? I haven't. They're like, well, you know, you've got a few weeks. You could maybe get something together. So I scrabbled around and got some tunes, some things that I was working on, extended them, and kind of made it into a 4-track, I think it is, 4 or 5 track EP. And it's called 66991. Because I was looking at my,
is that a speedometer?
That's a speedometer out of a 993 Porsche. And I was just looking at it and I thought, actually, and I was doing this to my friend. I was showing him like this and I thought, actually, that looks quite cool.
Yeah.
So it ended up, that's what it's called, 66991, which is the miles.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, yeah. I brought that up because I'm not at all surprised to hear you say, if you have time, you're listening to Chris Daddy Dave and drummers like that, because I can hear that in your playing just on this EP. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so exactly. That EP is me experimenting with that stuff. You know, I'm 52 actually this year. So
congratulations.
I'm considerably older than Chris Dave, I think. If not, I'm certainly older than most of the guys that are involved in that genre of music. And, you know, so for me, it's an experiment. I'm playing catch up with them. I'm trying to learn what they're doing with some of the feels and some of the sounds. And it's always fascinated me over the years. But interestingly, my day job, you know, when I'm playing on most people's records, it's much more traditional playing.
You come from sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, again, going back to what you said, which was not a lot's changed. I mean, I'm playing songs pretty much the same way I've always played them, you know, and a lot of producers, they're not saying to me, oh, can you play that sort of swung hip hop groove? I'm not getting asked to do that, you know. Sometimes, but very rarely, you know, so that's why I do it myself. That's
Sure,
why I've been making those grooves myself and putting some stuff out there.
But it's also a testament to who you are and the experience you have, that producers trust that you're going to do your thing, and it's probably going to be pretty perfect for what the song calls for.
I hope so. Definitely will do. You know, a lot of things are they're etched in stone. They just want you to replicate what's there in a lot of pop music. You know, and that's kind of cool. I like doing that, but also it's great when people say come up with something, and hopefully, yeah, you come up with the right feel, the right you know, the right groove and the right dynamic, you know, for the song.
Right. Do you come from a musical family? Do you have what did your parents do?
My parents, they weren't. No one in my family's a musician. I mean, you could argue that still there isn't, because if you think about the jokes about drummers. But yeah, I basically, my dad played me a record by Sandy Nelson called "Let There Be Drums," and when I was 10 years old, and I'd never heard. Obviously, music had been around me up to being 10, you know, but I'd never really focused on music ever. It was just the stuff that I guess it was just around. I never really thought about it much. And then my dad played me that record, and all of a sudden I was like, "What's that? What's that noise? Like, what's that sound?"
Yeah.
You know, and I just wanted to do it. That really cool sound. I want to do that, whatever that is, you know. And it's like, well, it's the drums that are making that sound. Okay, I want to play the drums.
Wow.
you know. And then that was that. And within about a year, I managed to bug them completely doolally that they bought me a drum kit, you know. And then I had lessons, and then here we are. I'm still doing it.
Wow. So you're sort of an anomaly in your family then.
Yeah,
that's really amazing. My great grandfather was a violinist, excuse me, and he was the concertmaster of the Radio City Music Hall.
Wow.
You know, so this is like 100 years ago, right? Yeah. But and I always knew that. And my grandma, his father, she was an opera singer, and I always knew that. But what I didn't know until I was in college, and that's when I was really, you know, serious about being a performer and everything. What I did not know was that she had a brother who was a big band drummer in the swing era. And when she told me that, I thought, wow, that is like, I never knew that person. But, you know, so to hear you, but to hear you say you're the only one in your family is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, you know, my dad said that my grandfather played the big bass drum in the local village band, just like hit the bass drum, but that's about as close as I could get, really. Yeah, no real musicians. My kids are slowly but surely getting into it, so it's starting. You know,
that's awesome. The next generation is starting.
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay, so you hear this record, drums speak to you, and you are on that path. So over the years, who have been some of your bigger mentors, and what have you learned from some of these people?
So, you know, funnily enough, jazz is where I started too. My music teacher at school, I was in a little jazz trio with him. So I was listening to Max Roach and Shelley Mann, and then I got into Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa. And I was a weird teenager. I was into big band music, Woody Herman, when all my mates were listening to Madonna, you know. But I really, really got into it. But then eventually I wanted, you know, there were other drummers that were sort of pricking my ears up other than the jazz thing. I was really into it and I loved it. And I was very fortunate. My dad took me to see Buddy Rich. So I met Buddy Rich and saw him play.
Wow.
And I met Art Blakey and saw him play with the Jazz Messengers as well when I was 14. Wow. So thank my dad for doing that, you know. You think that's pretty amazing. He was like a non-musician. He thought, my son's into jazz. He likes jazz drummers and he's heard some names. So he kind of booked the tickets. It's like, wow, pretty cool, you know. But you know, there were other bands. All of a sudden, Yes was around, and Rush, and most importantly for me, the Police, actually. So Stuart Copeland was one that made me go, okay, I'm gonna have to park these jazz guys over here a second and just have a listen to what this fella's up to, because I really loved it. And he opened the door for me for reggae, which is a genre that I really, really love. But you know, obviously Stuart's reggae isn't traditional reggae, but it was a sort of soft introduction to what I eventually got into. So Stuart was a biggie. You know, I got into the Average White Band when I was younger.
I got to see them at Ronnie Scott's a few years ago.
Fantastic. Was Steve Ferroni?
Oh, that's a good question. It was, what year was this? It wasn't that long ago. It was in 2018.
Oh, if it's Average White Band, probably not Steve then. Probably not.
Yeah. Can I ask you though, you're talking about Stuart Copeland. I haven't listened to this track yet, but is he also on the Completely Plain? Okay.
Yes. So through Trevor Horn, we were doing some festivals one year, about 5-6 years ago, and the set list is made up of songs that Trevor mainly has produced and likes to play live, like Slave to the Rhythm, Buggles tunes, and Lol Cream from 10cc is in the band, so we do some 10cc songs. And within the set list was Message in a Bottle, and I said, "Oh, great, we're doing that." And Trevor said, "Well," he said, "No, you're not." I said, "Oh," I said, "Who's doing it?" He said, "Stuart," and I went, "Stuart." You know, who's this Stuart guy? And he went, "Stuart Copeland." I was like, okay. So Stuart came and did I think we did 2 or 3 festivals with Seal, and Stuart was a guest, and he just came up and did Message in a Bottle. So I met Stuart then, and then I've been over to Los Angeles since, and with Trevor, and I've been around to his studio, and we've kind of got a sort of an online sort of friendship, and I've met him a few times and hung out a bit. And I was experimenting with a particular groove that was groups of 5, and I sent it to Stuart, and I said, "What do you think of this?" And he basically came up with that the backing track really of this groove that I had, and called it Completely Sane. And then when Seth's guys said, "Oh, we need you to put some music out," I just reached out to Stuart and I said, "Would you mind if I stick that track of ours on my EP?" And he's like, "Sure." So, you know, it's fantastic. He gave me, you know, the honor of having him on my my EP.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, he played guitar, bass, and keyboards and everything on it, and didn't play drums. The drums are me. So I'm hoping maybe in the future I can drag him to actually play kit as well with me at some point. So we'll see.
Oh, very, very cool. Wow.
Yeah.
I heard you say recently that you actually don't really practice anymore at this point, or maybe it's been a while. But I was wondering, and I've heard other really experienced musicians such as yourself say that, because the whole thing is if you're playing a lot, you are getting a lot out of playing. So I'm just wondering then, what is your approach when you do a new session? How do you prepare for that? And what are some basics that people should know if they want to do what you do as well as you do it?
You mean recording in at their own place, or any session?
Any session work, yeah.
Yeah. Well, like now, the stuff that I'm working on for next week, I'm writing it out.
So and you're writing out the drum part.
Yeah. So I'm writing out some of the fills are very specific, and they need to be right. They need to be like, basically the album we're doing is the original artist, but he's redoing his songs, and they're very famous songs. So I can't steam in and do my own drum fill. It's got to be the one that everybody knows on the record. So I'm listening to those, and I'm sketching those out, and I'm actually playing when I've sketched them out and gone around it, listened to it a few times. I will then play it on the drums and see how close I'm getting. But a normal session, same deal. I'll listen to the music, listen to it once or twice, sketch it out as far as the form's concerned. And if there's any particular things like specific drum fills or stops or dynamic changes or anything, I'll obviously start writing those on the chart, and I'll write a kind of chart out that's good for me. And then I'll play through it and see if I can, circumnavigate my own map.
Right.
And then hopefully get to a point where it's starting to feel good, and then we're ready to go. And that should hopefully be quite quick.
Okay. So, and you would typically always try to sketch out the part before you...
Absolutely. I do. I mean, there's some great musicians. The bass player that's on the session next week is Pino Palladino.
Oh,
and Pino's one of the only, I've asked him about it as well. He's one of the only amazing musicians that I know. There's a couple, most guys need a chord chart or they need some sort of reference. If they've just heard a song, not many guys can just hear it like 2 or 3 times and then go in and play it. There's not many really,
Right.
you know, properly play it. You know, there's some guys that can go in and like they might make a couple of mistakes, but if they play it 5, 6, 7, 8 times, well, now you're learning it. So it's a very different thing to originally going in and pretty much being able to play it after the first take with no chart is pretty impressive. Pino's got some sort of like alien
Wow.
Zen.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Buddy Rich. I mean, and he was supposed to be
Yeah.
one of the people who could do that too.
That's right. Well, apparently he never read.
Yeah.
So he would learn the horn parts. I guess like we would do if we're playing with a singer. You know, a great thing is to learn the song.
Sure.
You know, try and learn the way the lyric scans, and then you'll know where you are in the song. A great one is that I was told years ago. If you can sing it in your head, if you're on a live gig, for instance, as a drummer, it's a great way to get the tempo.
Yes.
Because if you can sing it comfortably, then count it off there.
Yes.
You know, I know that sounds really obvious, but it's amazing how many people just go, "Oh, what's this?" And they're thinking of the bass line. They might even be thinking of the drum groove. But if you can think of the vocal and where that sits, that's a great place to count it off.
Sure. That's funny because that reminded me of the the great group now, the Snarky Puppy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so they just put out this short clip in preparation for a new album they're going to record to kind of tease they're going to do a new recording. But in the clip, it's like maybe 60 seconds of short clips of all the musicians over time singing parts. And it's so cool. And I saw that and I thought that makes perfect sense. Of course, a band that good, of course, they're going to approach learning new music by singing it first.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if we're talking about the drummer or the horn player or the percussionist. Right. They're all singing the parts first.
It's like, you know, tabla.
Oh, yeah.
Tabla. So there's no notation with tabla. It's all phonetic. So you have to learn you have to learn all of the like patterns. So you can basically play the tabla without touching them. And there's some great masters at it that have been doing it for years that know like so much and they've got such a vocabulary in their head. And it's there and they can sing it all, you know, and play it. And I think, you know, it's a great tool that to sort of internalize grooves and feels. Yeah.
I had a teacher. His whole thing was if you can't sing it, you can't play it. That was his whole philosophy. And it was really helpful.
I agree with that. Actually, it's interesting. There's a drum fill actually just before you buzzed me. There's a drum fill that I'm working out, an intro drum fill from the 70s. So it's like, it's the way it starts. It's one of those drum fills like, oh, where's one? You know, for this artist. And I listen to it and try to get into the head of this guy that's playing it. And I'm like, okay, I think I know where he's at now. But by that point, I could sing it.
Sure.
And then I don't have to write it out. I know it now. So I don't have to write that particular fill out.
Well, Ash, I know you don't. We've got just a few more minutes here, so I wanted to make sure I ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
So you've been one of the top, if not the top, guy to call for doing this work for a long time. So how do you decide what to say no to, but how do you decide what to say yes to at this point?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very difficult to say no. I find it really. I did a session yesterday, and I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. And I just find it so hard to say no to anybody, really. But at this stage, where I'm at now, there's some really great things going on. So I have to sort of prioritize this sort of bigger artists in a way. So there's some of the things actually that I really want to do that are, you know, not so famous actually. But I've got to do the stuff that's coming up. So it kind of dictates it. It's the journey's dictated it to me now. I've got to concentrate on some bigger things at the moment. But then I'm looking forward to when they're over, going back to some other projects that are just music based projects, you know, and not so much about the dough.
Right. That's a wonderful position to be in too.
I'm in a very fortunate position here. Yeah. But it's taken a while, you know, like I say, I'm in my 50s now. and I've been doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, and incredibly, it seems to still be going. I always wake up thinking, is it gonna stop at some point? You know,
I hope not.
I hope not too.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I will not take up any more of your time. Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mike. All right, you're a star.
All right, my
you,
sincere thanks, Ash. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Take good care of yourself.
You too. Bye.
Bye, man. Bye.